with that came, the teachers were saying there's got to be a lot more flexibility in the curriculum. There was a lot of reflection on, I think, the standardized testing, and I know it was, everybody thought it was, it was had good intentions, but it had just the opposite of focusing in on a very, very small piece of education in a very small way, and also it didn't really reflect the diversity of the students. And by the diversity of students is the reason that Newport has managed to get, I think, their graduation rate up from the 70 percentiles up close to 90 now, is because you have kids who are struggling in one way or another. And if you're in this very narrow band of teaching, they do not thrive. But when you stick them into the art classes and the music classes and some of the alternative education programs, they blossom. They just blossom. And also in this, the teachers realized that the teachers also are asking for professional development to be able to accommodate these changes. Now, I think, so that became room and facilities and the teaching skills and a change of mentality a little bit. It's not all rule-based, everything is the flexibility and the adult connections with the students. I think one thing on behalf of Newport Public Schools is they have been kind of fearless in trying things out, and a lot of the stuff is really working, and I think it might, across all demographics. And if you try to keep kids in school and keep them interested and about learning, I think this is probably, the payback here is fairly high. I think also too the idea of, having a really diverse kind of set of skills leaving high school is something that the whole community is struggling with. Even, the college levels we teach and stuff, we're dealing with the same problems there too. The old algorithms don't work anymore. The sense of the Pell School, and if they're we're brainstorming, and some of the things that came up in that was, again, if we're going to do a new school, what would it be like? If we're going to design from scratch, what would it be like? And a little bit came up about the fact that when Pell was consolidated, it was consolidated from a lot of New England independent little schools, and they had to come together. And it was a tough sell, but it came together and it did work. And I think when we start hearing about regionalization and stuff and kind of combining, the other way you can get critical mass for AP, science and technology, career planning is to have a bigger facility, bigger competency, and so forth. And when we listen to some people from Middletown have been really quite advocating this all along. And I think we've lost the New England independence as being a good trait, and now it's not a good trait. It borders on all kinds of biases and really status quo mentality. So I think in terms of, like Beth was saying, in leadership here from the state level, I think that it might, my sense is it might be very, very worthwhile to incentivize the right kinds of things and along these lines, I guess, start pushing consolidation and stuff and really incentivize it. Lastly was, if we're going to they're brainstorming a new campus, more room for a lot of flexibility. Our career training program, where it is a good point. It doesn't have to all be in one place. But then they said, why don't you make it a campus? A campus that would have the innovation hubs, and it would also have businesses around there and restaurants around there. And so it becomes one of where the students and in the world of careers and stuff start overlapping a little bit. So anyway, it was long-winded, wasn't it? Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I have a hand up in the back. And your last name is very long. It's Cesarini, yes. I was going to just call you Mrs. C.
That's fine. So I have a daughter in 7th and 9th grade. So I came last night to the open house, and I have to say the teachers were very impressive, but the building itself, I was a little shocked. We're at Thompson, which is a fairly new building, but when I came into my daughter's classroom and her honors, I think it was science or social studies, the teacher actually had a fan blowing for the humidity. There was one panel that was broken down that looked like there was black mold on. I don't know for sure, but it looked like that. There was puddles in the hallway. There hasn't been any rain. So I think for me now, I'm wondering, with the current condition of the school, what are the kids exposed to in a health sense? But I could be wrong. It's just what I saw, but a lot of the panels were hanging down when I went into the gym. Even one of the panels was all brown on the top. So that would be my concern, is how the school is being maintained right now. Because the teachers were great, but I was pretty shocked when I walked in. So.
I'll just say I don't know anything specific about any one individual school, but we do know from this study where they went into all 300 plus public school buildings in Rhode Island, there absolutely are schools in Rhode Island that have health and safety deficiencies that need to be addressed. And that's why this is an urgent problem and something that we need to deal with now.
Mr. Michael, in the front, former custodian at the high school.
Hi, Gary Michael. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here. I think that we have a lot to offer here at Rogers. And the Newport system, I graduated here in '75, and I graduated from I went through the programs, so all the programs for the vocational. And I think Newport as a whole, the island as a whole, needs to interlock itself with the programs that the island has to offer so that they can keep the children here and keep people going. I mean, we have a superintendent, we have all kinds of people. We have the mayor, we have Mr. Napolitano has sons, we have, I can go on. We have all kinds of people here that have businesses, and it's great. It's really great. And that's what we should really be focusing on, is to keep our children here, keep them in state. And if we can find a way to, like Mr. Cullen said, and this gentleman said, is to bunch that together and work it with everybody, and to keep, you know, put that all together and make it work. It would be great, really would.
Thank you. Mr. Harrod, and I will just alert the audience, we have about another 5 minutes, so we'll be just probably taking another 1 or 2 questions.
This will be fairly quick. First, for my fellow military member, retired Colonel Tom Harrop, 28 years in uniform, now the superintendent of facilities for the city of Newport and Newport Public Schools. When I was full-time in the military, I did a lot of work in Massachusetts. One thing I've got to say is that in comparison to working with Bride, it's seamless up there. I think the requirements for submitting to RIDE are too voluminous, they're too bureaucratic, and there's too much to it. Working with Harold Cornelison, who I know now is here in Rhode Island, we would have designer selection boards where the state would select their designers, then any community that wanted to have a list of the designers didn't have to go out to bid. They could simply hire one of those designers that was qualified to design the project they needed to design. And as far as the capital improvement plans go, we didn't have to do so much work. We submitted the list of projects that we needed over the next 25 years. Then each year, the most critical projects, we would have a 35% design done, something conceptual, and as soon as we got it to that point, if it met requirements, then it was really the state that held the funding, and the state would provide the funds to municipalities and other agencies to take care of their projects. So I think moving forward, we can do things a little smarter and be more efficient and take care of the needs within the facilities. I'll say that we put an awful lot of effort into maintaining both the city buildings and the school buildings here in Newport. But with the funding constraints and having 50% of the custodial staff that we need and no maintenance staff, thankfully we have shared services with the city. I actually work with the city or oversee the schools. We're able to make it work. But at some point in time, we need to find a way to have the appropriate number of people to take care of the schools to the level required to try to have the tier 1 cleanliness in terms of custodial and the appropriate level of maintenance staff. And it's not something that any of the municipalities can afford to fund by themselves. I just wanted to throw that out there. I take pride in my work. I want to take care of these buildings, but we need your help. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for your military service, both of you guys. And thank you. I just asked the treasurer to follow up with you specifically because you make some great points and you clearly have in the trenches experience. So we'd love to spend some more time with you and get under the covers of what you've been saying. And okay, so we have multiple hands up. Okay, I'm going to go with you. Sir?
Yeah, hi, my name is Selwyn Sharp. I have 2 children in the Bristol Warren School District, and I come here tonight as an extremely frustrated parent with the way they look at safety in the district. I have a letter here that I wrote to the school committee on December 11th, 2016. I'd like to give it to you, Governor, if I may.
Sure.
If you could read that and get back to me.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
One of the things also, like we're talking about infrastructure, it should start from where a child has to walk to school. They should have a safe route to school. They should have a classroom where they're not suffering from heat stress, heat exhaustion, stuff like that, which my kids have experienced. And I've been to the school committee many times. I've had a school committee member tell my wife that there's a section of the school committee that as soon as I start speaking, they shut me up. And that's appalling. I'm sure if I leave town, I think the superintendent will clap hands, you know. I've been to the Joint Finance Committee meetings and tried to get them to fund the school district with the money they say they need. And there's 2 counties, Bristol and Warren, and you've got 2 councils, and they just butt heads, and they're like 8-year-olds in the schoolyard saying, I'm not paying that much, I'm not paying that much. So people who suffer are the children. And it's terrible. And I don't know what to say really about that, but it's like, it's very emotional for me to take my child to a school and leave my child at a school where, and that's not the school they're in now, it's the elementary school they were in, where the principal doesn't put their safety first. And when you read that letter, I'm sure you understand.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You know, we're
Thank
all
you.
emotional about our kids. Make sure to give someone on my team the way I can follow up with you because
I would.
I gotta get my reading glasses.
No, I don't expect you to read it now. I'd like you to read it and get back to me.
But I will. I
It's got
promise
my
you.
phone
We'll read
number in
it.
there.
It's in there. Okay, good. Thank you.
And there's some stuff in there that, there's a couple of typos, but I'll explain it to you when I do. Thank you.
And you have another question in the back?
I apologize, I came in late. I was across the building at the financial aid class workshop. I'm a 1984 graduate of Rogers High School. I met my husband here, who's also a graduate of 1984, and have many, many, many happy memories here, including performing on the stage with the School of Ballet that I was a part of and the dance troupe. And it's very sad to see when buildings get old and they need renovations and things like that. Again, I didn't hear what was said at the beginning of the program, but I apologize. I just throwing this out there as an idea. I've always wondered. So here we have this huge chunk of really, really valuable real estate in Rhode Island. Right down here, has it ever occurred to anyone in the school committee to sell the property and move to the north end? And then all the schools will be together. We've got a beautiful school in Pell, the north end of town. And some of the frustrations with the buses are that, you know, you can't get from one end of the island to the other. Well, maybe instead of trying to get the buses to solve the problem, let's move the building. And as much as I love this high school and this building, my parents are also Rogers graduates, but when they went to Rogers High School, it was in the building which is now the middle school. So things do change in Newport over the generations, and I just want to throw that out for consideration.
Thank you. Is that Mr. Cawley? Oh, no. In the back.
Chris McKenna, my daughter attends Rogers High School. I'm a graduate of a vocational school in New Bedford, and I didn't know if anybody opened that option to make it a regional vocational school on the island. It would help out. They've been very successful in New Bedford. I thought maybe you could look into that.
Yes, just for clarification, Newport Area Career and Tech services the entire island, Tiverton, Little Compton, actually North Kingston, Narragansett now, and we have students from Jamestown. And I have Ms. Jackson over here on the left, and we'll come back to the center in a moment.
Jennifer Jackson, parent, Thompson PTO president. Couple of points I want to make out. When we were building Pell, we knew that we were also having subsidized housing numbers increase. I don't think that was ever thrown into the pot. So when we build a new facility, I'm a little aggravated, so bear with me here. We have to think not only about the buildings that are going around, we got to look at job increase, housing increase. And one thing, I live right behind Pell. My yard is back of Pell. Also, as a favor of someone that went through the construction, went through, I'm sorry, Ms. Colleen, I'm not happy because I had problems during construction, my yard issues, which 6 years later still isn't resolved, but nobody cares, that's fine, whatever, I'm just throwing it out there. When you build a new site, all I'm asking as someone that went through it, consider the neighborhood, consider the people that live around it, consider the increase in number, and I get the feeling that we're talking about getting rid of Rogers, selling and relocating it to the north end because that's where the majority of the people live. Not north end, sorry, north side. There's no land over there. I don't know what we're gonna do. We have crunch for land. So the money we just put out for a new roof to put a Band-Aid on a wound is a safety issue, but also a waste of money. Because if we're not foreseeing a future of staying here, then why are we gonna keep putting a Band-Aid on something? I don't think that we need to move Rogers. I think what we need to do is transportation issues to make it more accessible here because of the land. And if we get rid of the school land goes back to the city, and the city gets any money that it's sold. If I got my things correct. So if the school gives up being on this property, the land goes to the city. So whatever millions of dollars, because we all know this will sell for millions, will go to the city, and the school loses out any financial benefits from this. So before we hop on a bandwagon of one thing, because we kind of hopped on the Pell bandwagon and we're back to square one, and we got our pre-K classrooms in Middletown, renting a Middletown facility, so not all our K through 4 are even in one building. I think we need to be realistic. I think we need a lot of input from a lot of different walks of people, not just the financial aspects or the ones with the degrees, but us common folk, you know, we kind of know a little something, and I'd appreciate it if we move forward with any changes in Rogers, that we really think hard so we don't end up where we ended up with Pell. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take the last question right in the center.
Hi, my name is Stuart Stroley. I'm a parent of 2 Pell children. We've really enjoyed the school system there. I did not go to school in Newport, but I've really been pleased with our experience there. But I want to speak to the bigger picture, and I think that what I see here is obviously a lot of need, and a lot of money has to be spent, but I also see a tremendous opportunity for the state to look at sort of how it's education as a statewide, with a statewide perspective. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity to look at 21st century education, look at things, whether it's teleconferencing or the ability to sort of treat all high schools here as much like one school system as possible, and allow them. I mean, I think there's a little bit of that already going on already with some of the unique programs that Mr. Collins spoke about throughout the island. But I think we need to think bigger than that, and there needs to be the ability to sort of link students with interests or talents from across the state and make sure that they are able to get together and push each other and collaborate and really lift each other up. Rhode Island is a very small state, so you can look at it, there's counties in Los Angeles and California that are bigger than our state, and I'm sure that they are working more collaboratively than we are as a state, even though they are a greater area and greater student body. So I really think there's a tremendous potential here to do something remarkable, because we're about to invest so much money, and using that money to sort of make sure that these school systems, these school districts are working together and not just taking their piece of the pie and going off and doing their own thing, but working to improve things throughout the whole state. And therefore, I think as we, the rising tide lifts all boats, I think there's really, that could really be applicable here.
Thank you. I think that's incredibly smart. This isn't spending money for spending money's sake. I mean, I hear the mom over here, that's alarming. Your kids deserve better, and we're gonna fix it. But it's not, so some of it is react with urgency, safe, warm, dry, but there's a much bigger opportunity here, which is to redesign these schools and think about, if we are gonna spend $500 million, $1 billion, man, that's an opportunity to do more than just new bricks and mortar. And so few of you made that point, which is think about the curriculum, think about the program, and use these resources to also improve the instruction and the quality. I think we all know this, like, I, graduated in 1989 from high school. When I graduated from high school, most jobs in Rhode Island, similar to when you did, you could get a decent job with a high school degree. There was no internet, no one had a computer, there was no Wi-Fi, STEM didn't exist. More than half of our schools in Rhode Island were built in the 50s and 60s. So we're going to set kids up for jobs of today and tomorrow. Then you're exactly right. We need to rethink and use some of these expenditures to help us get it right. So
May I make a quick recommendation? I mean, I see a fundamental flaw here. Do I need a microphone?
And being a very bad moderator. So Mr. Cullen is the last speaker.
Yeah. I see a fundamental disconnect between three of you sitting up here. I've gone through the Brookings report so many times. I spoke to one of the Brookings analysts for 2 hours on the phone. They've taught me that there are a lot of rich STEM assets in the state. They use the word, they're atomized. They're not brought together. I understand very, very well that the Brookings report mentioned the jobs that pay that you're seeking, that, Governor, you're bringing into Rhode Island require strong STEM skills. That's why Brookings mentioned STEM 80 times. I'm glad they did that. I'm glad you're working on CS4I coding, which was one of the 2 Brookings recommendations. The other one was STEM 80 times. And I'm not seeing any work there, but it gets even scarier for me because Dr. Wagner, who is responsible for the state's 5-year strategic plan for education, in the 49 pages, does not mention the word science, except in a footnote. It only uses the word math once across 49 pages. There's 0 reference to STEM, 0 reference to STEAM, yet thank you, Treasurer Magaziner, for mentioning the statistic about 75% of Rhode Island's schools don't have science labs.
So I would implore the task force to make sure they have the Brookings report in one hand, and then talking to Commerce Rhode Island, providing the task force the benefit of where these awesome jobs live. 3,100 killer kick-butt jobs exist 3 miles north of here called the Naval Undersea Warfare Center. You know what percentage of their employee base lives in Newport? 6%. You know what percentage of their 3,100 employees live in Aquidneck Island? 33%. You know how many live out of state yet work here? 1/3. So 2/3 of this employer's workforce takes their $200 million a year in salary and they drive it across the Pell Bridge or the Sakonnet Bridge. We need a real serious focus on making sure that kids graduating from our systems have really strong STEM, STEAM, plus coding skills.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
you're exactly right.
And I love the idea too about involving some of the folks from commerce, maybe some employers as we go through this process so that we're engaging with them to know what their needs are as we're thinking about what kind of facilities we want to have.
Yeah, it's a really good suggestion. Thank you. That's why we did that report, and you're exactly right.
So I'm officially closing the remarks and questions, and if there are any final comments, I'd like to thank everyone on behalf of the Newport School Department and on behalf of Mr. Hanos, Maya, and the school committee.
We want to thank you for
And,
hosting us and
well,
moderating. I've never been on a panel where the moderator knows the name of every single person. That was so impressive.
This is Newport. There you go. We're all waiting.
I think you guys are terrific, and this is just the beginning, and I got a bunch of my staff here. We'd be happy to continue to hear from you. We're going to follow up specifically with a few of you on some specific things, but we got to get this right. You've all made excellent points. So you're right, we need leadership from the top, and I agree with that, and that's why we initiated this whole process. But we also need local input. And so I think this was a great beginning, and I hope you will stay in touch and go home and think about it. And if you say, oh, I wish I had said this, I wish I had said that, or maybe we're too shy to speak up in front of a crowd, send us an email, because we want to hear, and we want to get this right. So thank you for your time.